Let's go to the economy, which lifted just 0.2% in the September quarter. But because of upward revisions to previous quarters, annual growth doesn't look so bad. It came in at 2.1%. But what's clear is the economy right now is struggling under the weight of all those interest rate rises plus the inflation, because underneath things are not good. Per capita GDP is down yet again. Even if the economy is not in recession, then households clearly are. The savings rate dropped to just 1.1%. Pre-pandemic, it was sitting around 6.6%. CommSec says that was the 5-year average. So what's happening right now is that people are cutting into their savings to really afford the cost of living and those higher interest rates. And really, that is the stress that many households are clearly facing. So household disposable income, that's falling. Though wages, this is interesting as well, are now rising much faster than inflation. So in other words, after you heard unions talk about real wages falling for such a long time, and that was really their demand for higher wages, right now, the wages, according to these latest numbers, they're rising faster than the inflation rate. So this all prompted the Commonwealth Bank's head of Australian economics, Gareth Aird, late today to say that the first interest rate cut here in Australia could come in the third quarter of next year. Previously, economists have said that the rate cut would not come until probably 2025. But let's go to Treasurer Dim Chalmers' take on these numbers today.
This is because of higher interest rates, high but moderating inflation, and continuing global economic uncertainty, including in China. This is slowing growth in our economy. Our economy is resilient in parts, but we know that these are hard times for a lot of Australians.
Yeah, well, quite clearly now, the economy is the big thing. We've talked about interest rates there and the reaction to it. Matt Hassan is a senior economist with Westpac and joins me now. Matt, many thanks for your time. Just take me through these numbers. Westpac today said the economy hit the wall in that September quarter. That's pretty big talk.
Yeah, these are a game changer, these numbers today. They paint a very different picture for the economy in terms of momentum. We see the consumer stalling flat in terms of consumption, really starting to run down its reserves as well. Savings rates dropped to 1.1, incomes under intense pressure. Any sort of talk about demand being resilient, I think, is out the window.
Yeah.
Interest rates and fiscal policy are clearly biting in the consumer space and biting pretty hard. And I think that makes the hurdle for additional rate hikes pretty high now. The economy's clearly weak. We're barely seeing growth, 0.2% in the quarter, 2.1% through the year, not keeping up with population growth, and particularly around that consumer space, which we sort of view as the lead sort of indicator for the rest of the economy. Things are not going well.
Okay, so then we talk about the concept of a hard landing for our economy or a soft landing. Everybody said that the Reserve Bank was trying to massage it, the government was trying to massage it for a soft landing. But this really shows that maybe the trajectory of that landing is a bit steeper than they thought.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know about a hard landing just yet. I think, fortunately, we haven't taken the cash rate to 5 and a bit.
Yes.
We're still in the 4s. And we have scope to sort of unwind some of that if it is leaning too hard. We still need to get out of the woods on inflation, though. I think for the RBA, that puts them in a really awkward spot. If we get a bad inflation number for the December quarter, they're in a real quandary because the demand side of the economy is weak, particularly in the consumer space. But if it's not sufficiently weak to close the gap with supply and inflation is still threatening, particularly around expectations, they're in a really difficult in a bind as far as possible.
And yet every message we've heard from the government, from the Treasurer in the last little while, is about being tight because they didn't want to go and spend. What I'm wondering is, given the fact there's an election coming and they're in surplus, whether this gives them now the incentive to go out there and spend some money and provide households with a bit of cost of living relief.
Possibly. I think, the political cycle's not quite there. It's not this budget, it's the budget after that's really the pre-election spend-up, one that they'll be targeting politically. I think, though, the imperative right now in the political space is around cost of living pressures. And it's written all over today's update in the household sector. Where there is some relief, it's showing through in kind of perverse ways around electricity spending and so forth. But where it's showing through pretty clearly is around that tax take out of the household sector. At the end of the run-off of the Lamito support was a huge factor in the quarter that we'd overlooked and is paints a much weaker picture around incomes.
So in other words, that was the government support. That was there for the cost of living relief, which then was taken away. And so as a result, the households then fall backwards. And really, that's got to cut into their spending, which we're seeing. One other thing I was talking about earlier, real wages are now going up. Right, that's the issue. You previously saw wages, real wages shrinking. They're now starting to rise, but that's not taking enough pressure off, are they?
Well, I think it's still in the back of the RBA's mind. I think the update today and some of the revisions has probably reduced some of that pressure around unit labour costs. We've talked about this in the past. The cost base of the economy domestically has been rising too quickly. Poor productivity growth, rising wages is part of that picture. Today's number probably at the margin was a little bit milder than what we'd been staring at.
In fact, productivity went up a little bit, which was perverse. Everybody's talking about productivity improved a little bit.
Not in the way you want,
no.
With a feeble GDP and a contraction in hours worked, but at least it's sort of taking some of the noise out of that picture.
Yes, just a quick one for me. When is the first interest rate cut coming now? Have you revised your suggestions here?
So, look, we have a cut starting from the third quarter next year. As I said, I think this changes the narrative, makes the hurdle a lot higher for an additional rate hike in February. The RBA is still going to look to traverse that inflation update. Back end of next year is still looking the most likely.
Matt Hassan, always great to have you on the program. Many thanks for your time today.